everybody, and today I'm going to be talking about flavor in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Although, to be fair, the advice and concepts I'm going to be talking about today can really be applied to pretty much any tabletop role-playing game or any RPG in general. Basically, anything you have the ability to describe at your own discretion, this can be used for. What I'm going to be talking about with flavor specifically is today, at least, what flavor is. I do hope in the future to be able to move this into a sort of series where I can talk about different things and how you can flavor them different ways. But for today, I'm just going to be discussing what flavor is because I think it's a really interesting concept, and it specifically is one of the actual core concepts that can make tabletop gaming in general feels so special and unique compared to anything else out there. So I'll just go ahead and move into it. What is flavor? Well, flavor is essentially the ability to take anything outside of the mechanics and make it fit what you want. Now that's a little bit of a strange way of describing it, so let me put it in a little bit more detail. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, or again, any tabletop gaming, you have a specific set of rules that you're supposed to follow. It provides structure to the game. Well, it is a creative game and an exercise in being able to spread your wings and really feel your creativity. The rules are there to provide structure. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of kids in the backyard playing make-believe where there are no rules and they can do whatever they want and I'm more powerful than you because I say so. No, tabletop gaming gives you those rules so that you can really have structure. Flavor is the ability to bend the rules, not mechanically, but narratively, to be able to make it fit what you want. Flavor is very important because it allows us to play what we feel is unique and not just constantly repeat the same concepts over and over again. Let's give an example. Say, for example, you're playing with a DM who's really not comfortable with most of the rule sets. They are very new to the game, and they say, hey guys, I don't really want you guys to use anything from Xanathar's. I don't want you to use anything from Tasha's, nothing from Mythic Odysseys of Theros. Just use the player's handbook. That gives you a very limited amount of stuff to do, but because you are a good player and you want to be able to help your DM out, you're going to go ahead and use the player's handbook and just go ahead and use what you have. But it makes you very limited. This is where flavor comes in. Despite the fact that the rules you have to work with are very limited, the amount of character concepts you have are nearly infinite. Flavor is the ability to look at those things and change what they look like in the story. So say you're going to play an Eldritch Knight. An Eldritch Knight is a fighter who casts magic. Nothing more, nothing less. Mechanically, that's what they do. But what you can do is you can take that and change it. Are you an Eldritch Knight who has been granted powers from a dark being and you are able to cast these spells because they have given you those abilities, giving you a little bit of a warlock feel? Maybe whenever you cast those spells, it is not just, the simple motions that a wizard would do to cast it, but you are drawing upon dark energy, and every time you cast the spell, your skin begins to blacken and your eyes glow. Or maybe you want to go a little bit more of a studious route. You really are an Eldritch Knight who has just studied upon wizards and noticed what they do, but you have a sword in your hand. You can't do the same intricate motions with their fingers. So instead, you have learned to carefully craft these runes in the air with your blade and then cast the spell. Both of those characters are going to have the exact same abilities, but they do it in two totally separate ways. You could have two Eldritch Knights casting the same spell in the same round of combat, but the flavor and description makes it feel like two equal opponents using their unique abilities to clash against each other. A great example of flavor from pop culture is Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Gandalf the Gray is a wizard. So is Radagast. Radagast the Brown is a wizard from a different part of the story. They are both wizards and both incredibly powerful, but what makes them different from each other if they're playing the same class? Now one can easily point out, hey, maybe they're playing different subclasses. Lord of the Rings was not D&D. It is very much what D&D is somewhat based off of, but Lord of the Rings is something different. It is a story. So obviously they're not playing two different subclasses, but they feel very different. This is because they're flavored in two different ways. Gandalf the Gray, I would say, is flavored very much off of radiance and light. Usually everything he does is based off of light. When he taps his staff, he can cause it to glow and give themselves a view around them. When he's fighting off the Balrog, he slams his staff down and holds up his sword, and a giant radiance bellows out and pushes the Balrog backwards. Meanwhile, Radagast is a very strange and eclectic wizard. He has moles growing out of his beard, right? He can sit on a sleigh and have these strange woodland creatures pull him along. He is definitely unique to Gandalf, despite the fact that they're both wizards. This comes down to flavor. If we were going to go ahead and take this into D&D terms, say they both knew the spell Sleep. If I were to think about the ways they would cast Sleep, it would be very different. If Gandalf cast Sleep, I would describe him as taking his staff and causing it to light up with that holy radiance, slamming it down and causing this massive light to billow out, which then causes the creatures around him to become incapacitated. Meanwhile, Radagast might wave his hands and cause spores to float through the air and slowly infect and cause the enemies in front of him to waver and fall before falling to slumber. Mechanically, they've both done the same thing. They put the enemies in front of them to sleep. But flavor-wise, if they were to do these things side by side, you would think they have just done two totally different things to achieve the same goal. That's the power of flavor. It allows you to take different characters that have the same abilities and feel wholly unique so that you don't have to be restricted just by the rules of the game. Another wonderful example of this is Hulk and Iron Man. Now, in Age of Ultron, Iron Man and Hulk face off against each other. Now, in order to do that, Iron Man does not have the ability to face off against Hulk. He has to bring in an entirely new suit of armor, which makes him equivalent to the Hulk. At this point, you are seeing two characters who have the same abilities fighting against each other. Both huge, both strong, both massively powerful. But they seem like two separate characters because it is flavored differently. Iron Man is this strong because of the technology that's bolstering him and the abilities that he's granted himself by building these machines. Hulk is this strong because of the gamma radiation running through his body and his own fury. Two different characters, same concept, but because of the flavor, they feel separate. This is why flavor is so important in tabletop roleplay. It allows you to play even the same classes at the same table, though by doing so, I would check in with your DM and with the other players. But by doing so, you can feel like totally different people and not feel like you are confined to only the class that you're playing. Some people will introduce their characters by saying, I am a ranger. You are not a ranger. A ranger is what you do. It is the essence of your character that is different than the class that they play. The class is only their occupation. I can tell somebody that I am a writer, and somebody else can say that I'm a writer, but nobody assumes we do the same things. It is the same way in any tabletop role-playing, but especially D&D. The flavor of what you're doing is what makes everything so significantly unique. So the next time that you're playing, consider the flavor of what you're doing. Don't consider just the mechanics behind what it is that you're doing. If you cast a spell, how does your character cast that spell? There's no way that everybody else in the world casts a spell the exact same way they do. Is your fireball unique to everybody else's? Is your wall of water different? Does it form a different way? When you take that swing with that sword, do you do it in a way that nobody else does? Consider the flavor, and most of all, make sure to check in with your DM and your other players before you do this. Nothing's worse than coming to the table with a cool idea for flavor that you're really excited about. And as your artificer casts Thunderwave, they toss a grenade, which causes an explosion, and getting caught in the middle of your entire description as the DM goes, hold on, what are you casting? What are you doing? That's not an ability you have. Don't confuse them in that way. Instead, go ahead and check in with the DM and make sure the flavor is cool so that they can also lead into it and give these descriptions and help you out. But at the end of the day, flavor is the spice that adds variety into D&D. You can play the same classes over and over again and still be able to have fun because you have the ability to change what they do consistently. Let the flavor dictate how your character acts. Let yourself experience a uniqueness in your character that nobody else has, even if they are playing the same class and subclass. It is very important to be able to enjoy it, especially as you continue on. Now, some people don't need this to enjoy it, and so don't hear me say that you must do this. This is simply an option, especially for those veterans who've played this for a long time. I think it can add a lot of fun to the table, but some people just enjoy just playing the base of what's there, and that's okay. But this can add a very unique and extra layer to the role-playing that you're currently doing. Thank you for joining me during this conversation today, and I hope you all have a wonderful